When I think back to my time in college, I certainly remember my classes, the dorms, all of the activities I did, and the friends that I made along the way. But one of the biggest memories that I have from college was being so excited to be living in New York City and honestly so ready to get to work and be part of the quote unquote real world. I started interning the summer after my freshman year of college, and from working alongside a fashion designer in the garment district to a remote blogging type internship to actually getting bylines in some of the biggest national publications, it really felt like I had been around the block when it came to interning in the fashion and publishing industries. In some ways, I truly did try it all. So today we are going to take a little walk down memory lane, and I wanted to share some stories from my days as a New York City fashion intern. We'll talk through some of the highs and lows and the pros and cons of all of the various internships that I tried that ultimately helped me land my first job after graduating and really set the foundation for the career in social media that I have today. Before we get into my New York City intern diaries, let's first do a little create and consume. As far as what I've been creating this week, I just published a vlog on my YouTube channel that is a few autumn days in my life. And in this vlog, I take you up to Central Park. It's like peak foliage at the time that I filmed. So if you have been looking for a cozy way to visit Central Park, but maybe you don't live in New York City, or maybe you didn't find yourself with enough time to make a trip up there before the foliage really peaked, I did that for you so you can just sit on your couch, make a cup of hot chocolate, and enjoy. Also, in that vlog, you see a little bit of a behind the scenes moment of me filming some short form content. So, if you've ever wanted to see a weekend in the life of a content creator, I feel like this was a good glimpse into what a few normal days are really like for me. And also in that video, I went to the Signal Awards winners party, which the Signal Awards is for podcasting. And while Create and Consume did not win a Signal Award this year yet, maybe in the future we will work our way up there. It was really cool to be invited to an event specifically for podcasting and to get to meet other podcasters, some of whom have ongoing shows that have been on for 7 or 8 years at this point, which is crazy to think about. Create and Consume is about 18 months old at the time that I'm recording this episode. And there were also some people who were nominated for limited series. Ashley Flowers, who hosts the Crime Junkies podcast, accepted an award and she thanked her team of over 100 people. Could you imagine the scale of that? Like, that is actually so crazy to think about. And I think that speaks to the importance of podcasting and what a dominant medium it really has become over the years. So it definitely gave me a lot to hopefully look forward to and a lot to think about in terms of my show too. So that was really fun. All of that is in the vlog on my YouTube channel. I will link it in the show notes in case you'd like to go watch that. And then as far as what I am consuming this week, and if you're new here, consuming can be anything from like reading to watching to actually consuming, like eating or drinking. As far as what I've been consuming this week, I finally just finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This has been on my TBR for a number of years at this point, and it's one of those books that my mom actually had purchased and lent to me. So it was always sitting on the bookshelf, and it was like, perfect. That's there right when I have a moment for it. And I finally had a moment for it. And I'm so glad I did because I think this is going to be one of my top books of the year for sure. It was just such an engaging and endearing and really interesting story. I feel like I tend to gravitate towards, well, I don't know actually. I think my taste in reading has really evolved over the years. I was going to say primarily romance, but I feel like I've also read mystery this year. I've read literary fiction, I've read memoirs. I've really been trying to like branch out, but still at the end of the day make sure that I'm reading for fun. And one book that I always like to try to get in at least one of in each year of my reading goals is a friendship story. And that I think is really at the core of what this book was. And I just enjoyed it so much. All of the characters, like, despite their flaws, I was really endeared to them and I really cared about them throughout the entirety of the book, which I think is really important to keep someone interested and keep someone coming back, for each session that they sit down to read. I think with a lot of books, this one was a little slow going for me in the beginning, but the way that it picked up and the kind of little plot twist, I won't give too much away, but the unexpected component of the story that kind of came a little after the midway point really propelled me through all the way to the end, to the point where I was like, I have to know what happens. I have to see how this plays out. And I really did enjoy this one. So if it's been on your TBR, I guess that was sort of a backlist pick for me because I think it came out in 2022. But I'm so happy that I was able to read it. And hopefully it should also be easy for you to request from your library if it's an older book too. So I will link it in the show notes if you were interested in ordering it for yourself. But like I said, I think since it came out a few years ago, that should be a good one to request from your library with no wait time. And don't forget to let me know what you are creating and consuming this week, too. I always want to hear from you guys. So if you're watching over on YouTube, you can leave a comment below this video. If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment over there as well. And actually, also, while I have you guys, if you have been enjoying the podcast, if you could take 1 minute to rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple or Spotify, if you're listening on one of those platforms, that would really mean a lot to me. If you've been enjoying the podcast and you feel that it is worthy of a 5 star rating, now would be an amazing time to leave a little review. And thank you in advance to any of you who choose to do that and any of you who have done that already. It really does help the show get in front of more people and it helps me grow. And if you do ever have like real feedback for me about the podcast, you can always reach out. All the ways to get in touch are in the show notes. Okay, so let's get into the topic of today's episode. And I was kind of inspired to do this episode. I've had it on my running list of ideas for a long time, but the reason I bumped it to the top was because last week I did a virtual panel for Beyond Barnard, which is Barnard College's career development office. And I love that Barnard has such robust career development like programs and resources. It is one of the things that I really liked about the school when I was looking at it. I feel like even when I was at Barnard, I was able to get in touch with a lot of alumni who worked in the fields that I was interested in. I was able to do a lot of like informational interviews and phone calls. And to this day, I'm still in touch with a lot of those people. So the fact that they have these resources is really, really cool. And I got invited to be on a virtual panel talking all about navigating freelance careers. So it was me and 3 other Barnard alums who work in all different types of creative careers. One of them is a screenwriter, one of them is an artist, one of them is a graphic designer. And then I kind of was there for the freelance writer and content creator perspective. I really loved doing this panel. I always am happy to give my time back because I know how valuable that was for me when I was in college too. So it was really fun to do that. But even talking to those students now, some of them are about to graduate and are looking for jobs and are, maybe not so optimistic about what is going to happen for them when they do graduate in May, looking at, just the economy, the types of jobs that are being offered. It's changed so much since I went to college, not to date myself, but I did graduate college, 9.5 years ago. So there is certainly a lot that's changed, but I do still think that making connections while you're in school, getting internships or finding, winter break projects that you can work on or people that you can shadow or just people you can learn from, all of that is really helpful to help you decide what type of career you're interested in the future and what types of industries and jobs and people are the things that make you excited to get up and go to work every single day. And I feel like I could also do a whole other episode about like the idea of a dream job and how that has also changed a lot over the years, because I used to be obsessed with the idea of a dream job and desperate to get the quote unquote dream job when I graduated. And I just feel like there's so much that has shifted even there. But I do think, generally speaking, that you probably don't want a job that you hate. So even if it's not your dream job, thinking about the industries you're interested in and the people and all of that stuff, I just think that it is helpful to do internships if you can, or do paid projects or assist people or whatever it is to really like get your foot in the door. I think that is the key phrase that in some ways may be overused, but also is the thing that we keep coming back to because it is the perfect way to describe that first step that you take and that first connection that you make. So I obviously hope that there is some value here and still some relevance to today and what these kind of different types of internships could look like. But if nothing else, I also hope that this episode is a fun, cozy trip down memory lane. If you have ever watched TV shows like The Bold Type or movies like The Devil Wears Prada and you've wondered about working in fashion or working at magazines or working in publishing, Also Confessions of a Shopaholic. How dare I forget one of my favorite fashion magazine movies ever. That hopefully this gives you a little bit of intel and insight into how I got each internship, what the internship actually entailed, and what I learned about myself and the type of career that I ultimately wanted after doing each one. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through the 6 internships that I did during college in the fashion and publishing industries. Now, 6 obviously sounds like kind of a lot of internships, but I can't stress enough how excited I was. Like for all of the summers that I interned, that was truly the way that I wanted to spend my summer. Like you could not tell me that there was something more fun or more exciting than being right up close and personal with all of the editors at these magazines that I read and worshiped for years. And also worth mentioning, I did go to college in New York City. So that was one huge benefit that allowed me to intern during the semester and also to get housing through my school for the summers that I was in New York. I do think that's worth mentioning. And back in, 2014, 15, 16, the years that we're going to be really talking about today, there were not as many remote internship opportunities available. It really did feel like you needed to be in, New York, LA, Chicago, fill in the blank of whichever city was closest to you or that you were most interested in ending up in. Okay, so let's go all the way back to the summer of 2013 and talk about my very first fashion internship. My first ever internship in New York was with a designer named Hunter Bell. She still has her line to this day, and I first found out about Hunter through a TV show called Fashion Star. Now, this was a short-lived TV show on NBC that actually had a great concept, which was, how for Project Runway, designers will design things that are more avant-garde, like not as commercialized, or at least that's the way it was in like the 2000s and early 2010s. Fashion Star was a show where designers would compete, and the way that they would be judged was once they completed their designs, there were different buyers who were the judges from, I feel like it was like Macy's, Bloomingdale's, and Neiman Marcus. Maybe they rotated also depending on the season or depending on the week, but you were determined on how successful you were based on the buyers actually placing orders for your designs. I always thought that was a fascinating concept. So anyway, Hunter actually won. I think that was season 1 of Fashion Star. So I already had heard of her and knew who she was. There was no way that I was actually sitting in my living room in suburban New Jersey going, oh, well, this person won this TV show. Let me intern for her. What ended up happening was an incredible stroke of luck and a 6 degrees of separation story. So the 6 degrees of separation of how I myself, an 18-year-old girl, got connected to Hunter Bell, who was like one of the hottest designers at that time and who still is a great designer, went something like this. So I went to high school with a girl named Rachel. Rachel's dad did SAT tutoring for students. So one of his students, that student's mother, owned a showroom in New York City. And one of the fashion designers that she happened to represent was Hunter Bell. And this is also a great example of like being young and naive and telling anyone who will listen what your dreams are and what you want to do with your life. Because my friend's dad knew that I was interested in fashion. And when he was talking to his 2T's mom, essentially, I guess it somehow came up in conversation like, oh, one of my daughter's friends is really interested in fashion. I think she's looking for an internship. And then that mom said, oh, I could probably ask some of my designers if they like need any help this summer. And literally that's how that happened. The woman who ran the showroom, her name was Jean, shout out Jean. She was the person who got me my very first fashion internship ever. And again, that was just because I was excited talking about it to anyone who would listen, and someone actually listened and helped me get connected. I interned there for 2 months. I want to say that I went from like the beginning of June, right after the semester ended, through the end of August, right before school started. And I lived at home that summer. So I took the bus from my home in New Jersey into the city 3 days a week, I want to say. And I basically like took the bus to Port Authority, and then I was able to walk to the office, which was in the garment district. I am so grateful that I had this internship because these days I feel like any designer who produces entirely in the garment district is just such a rare thing. And it's just because cost wise, it is so much cheaper to produce everything overseas now. but it was such a special moment in time to get a close up look at what it actually was like to be in factories in New York City. My grandmother also, at one point in her life, worked as a seamstress in the garment district, so it made me feel super connected to her at the time as well. I forget what the exact numbers were, but back in the 60s, the garment district produced, I believe, a majority of clothing that was worn by Americans, and today I think it produces like less than 1% of all American clothing, which is crazy to think about. So the fact that I did have this internship in 2013, I feel like I kind of got a last look at old New York and a last look at what the fashion industry really looked like from the inside out. And there are still people who produce in the garment district, but it's just so much more expensive. It's so much cheaper and for a lot of people more streamlined to produce overseas. So I remember even in 2013, that was a point of discussion in the office at some points. And it was a really small and scrappy team at the Hunter Bell office at that time. It was Hunter, the designer. I believe we had a production lead. She had an assistant designer. And then we had someone else in marketing and sales. And then it was them and the interns. And I remember 3 or 4 other girls who interned together with Hunter that summer, and we would kind of all be in like on different days and stuff. I basically was just there to help with literally anything that they needed help with. So sometimes that was helping assemble mood boards. At the time, it was also like running their social media. And like I had started my blog the summer before this internship at the time. It was one of the few things that I was even able to like put on a resume that I sent to Hunter in the first place, was the fact that I had a blog. So I feel like this running joke in the media industry about like, oh, remember when the interns used to do social media? But like, I actually did used to do their social media. And because I was into blogging, I knew a lot of the big bloggers who lived in New York. So we would DM them from like the Hunter account on Instagram. And then they would come into the office and they would maybe get like gifted pieces, or they would at least get to have a meeting with Hunter and they would get to know each other. Also, if we were like desperate or like really about to miss a shipping deadline, sometimes I would literally be packing the clothes in the factories into the plastic bags that they come in. They're called poly bags. I feel like this so would not be allowed in 2025, especially. I didn't even get to this part yet, but the fact that this was an unpaid internship, that I was literally just doing free labor in a factory. But you know, you live and you learn. And other times I also got to help with going to B&J trimming, picking up like the buttons that they needed or things like that. But you have to understand, 18-year-old me could not have thought of anything better to do with her time that summer, like in all seriousness. So I had a blast. And also, one of the things that I helped do that summer was help organize the Fashion Star top 3 sample sale. So Hunter won that TV show Fashion Star I was telling you about. So she and then the runner up and the third runner up decided to come together in New York and do a sample sale of their pieces. And it was pitched as like the Fashion Star top 3 sample sale. But it ended up being one of my favorite days because I got to meet Daniel Silverstein, who was the runner up of NBC's Fashion Star. And he went on to found the brand Zero Waste Daniel, where he produces clothing and accessories entirely out of discarded fabric scraps. And I just think Daniel is so incredible. We have actually stayed in touch all throughout the years. So I've known him for over 10 years now. He is just absolutely incredible. I saw that last year he designed one of the accessories that Alan Cumming wore while he was hosting Traders, which was so cool. I profiled Daniel for Nylon magazine well before the Times ever interviewed him. Let me just say that. And he's just one of my favorite people I've ever met in the fashion industry. Definitely look him up. I will leave his Instagram and everything linked in the show notes. And this was also a monumental internship for me because one day I was in a factory steaming dresses that were about to get packed when I got a phone call letting me know that I had been accepted to transfer to Barnard College. So my freshman year, I went to Muhlenberg in Eastern Pennsylvania. I went there for 1 year and I just really missed being in the city. I was just like excited to get back to the city. I wanted to be able to intern during the semester and be in New York and just get to attend events and like meet more people. So I did put in to transfer to Barnard. It was the only school I applied to transfer to. And I found out in the middle of a factory on like 38th Street that I got off the wait list as a transfer student to Barnard. So that will always be a memorable day from that internship for me as well. And I probably wouldn't have done half the other internships on this list had I not transferred to Barnard, moved to New York, and really taken that leap. So That will always be really special to me. And again, at this brand, it was really small and scrappy. So I definitely felt like I learned a lot, got to be really hands on with stuff, helped at, photo shoots with fit models, all of those things. And I also, towards the end of the summer, got to do a photo shoot with me and the other interns for my blog. Like, I asked if we could wear some of the outfits and do a blog post featuring the clothes, which we got to do. I will leave a link to that in the show notes too if you want to go back and read that. And at the end of the summer, we also all were gifted one item from her collection, which was actually really sweet. But, also a whole summer of unpaid labor. We got one dress out of it. Essentially, what did I learn about this? Well, I think I learned that I did not want to be a fashion designer. I mean, growing up, fashion was always this really cool industry that I was interested in. And fashion designer was the main job that I was aware of in fashion, unrelated to like magazines and things like that. And I just learned that it's so much work. Like, you really have to stay true to your brand, but always be doing something new and have the best materials, but keep the prices somewhat affordable. And there's just so much. It is almost like the scale is going up and down all day, every day, and you're just trying to figure out how to balance it. And it's not for the weak. Let me say that. It really isn't. I also couldn't draw to save my life. So the idea of actually becoming a fashion designer, it just became more and more apparent to me throughout the summer that that was probably a bit of a stretch for me, at least. Okay, moving on to the next internship I did. This was with a website called College Fashionista that I believe is still in existence, but I could not find any of my articles from this internship. At the time, I had applied for what was called a style guru internship. Maybe we're not using the word guru anymore. I don't know. Or maybe they just decided that all of that content was not really up to par for their website and ended up scrapping it. And this was a really unique opportunity for the time that it was. I guess it would have been spring of my sophomore year at Barnard. So it would have been spring 2014 because it was while I was still in school, unless it was fall 2013. Again, unfortunately, I actually don't know because I can't find any of my articles. Like, they all are not online anymore. But essentially, what this internship was I basically became kind of like a college correspondent for College Fashionistas. So they had different people doing this internship from schools all across the country. And it was my job to go out each week, find like the best dressed student, quote unquote, on campus that week, take their photo and ask them a series of questions about like their outfits and their major, and really just get like the details of what they were wearing that week. And as a concept, I actually loved this idea, and it was the really only internship I did that was very independent, where it didn't require that much collaboration with other people. I don't even really remember if anyone proofread my articles or not, or if I just basically like took the photos, wrote them up, and then uploaded them. But it was really cool. So essentially, I would pick like one afternoon a week to walk around campus and see what people were wearing. Sometimes I would try to get my friends to do it for me. Other times I would actually try to go out and be like, all right, let me see what's out there, unplanned, like what's everyone wearing today. That wasn't always easy during the winter months, especially when people were super bundled up, but I feel like I managed to do that pretty consistently. I think I ended up writing like 12-ish articles in total for 3 or 4 months of whatever the internship length ended up being. I did get to meet some new people on campus and talk to some people who maybe otherwise I wouldn't have actually talked to. And I think ultimately what I learned from that one was that I really just loved the freedom and flexibility of being able to do that internship without too much disruption to the rest of my weekly routine. I loved being able to just work from my laptop. I feel like it also helped me become a better photographer for my own content and my blog, because I was finally out like shooting other people, learning how to use my camera, learning how to capture that content and tell a good story, especially when I had the same format each week time and time again. So I feel like that also helped me brainstorm like maybe other repeatable series ideas for my blog, learn what it was like to collaborate with other people or to photograph other people. So I don't have too much more to say on that one, just because relative to all my other internships, I probably spent a total of like maybe 25 or 30 hours in total on this internship versus other internships where I was there usually like at least 2 or 3 days a week. but it was definitely a cool extension of what I was already doing with my own blog and a chance to kind of get my digital byline out there and start writing for other publications. And I do think that that came in handy when I went to apply to my next batch of internships. I want to say this summer between sophomore and junior year, summer 2014, was when I interned at Marie Claire. And this was my first ever magazine internship. So you have to imagine I was thrilled beyond belief when I first got word that I actually got this internship. And even though I didn't have any magazine internships at that point, I think when they looked at my resume and saw like college fashionista, worked with a designer, and has her own blog, like that kind of trifecta of things was enough in the right direction to let them know that I had background in writing, I had background in fashion, and that I had done other stuff in the city. So I think those things really helped bolster my resume to, even though I didn't have direct experience working at a magazine, it was a handful of dots that I think the hiring manager was able to connect and say, like, okay, this girl's had enough relevant, similar experience where this could be a good fit. And actually, one other thing that was on my resume that I forgot to put in my notes, but I just remembered as I was talking, was that when I got to Barnard, Barnard is the Women's College of Columbia, and I had a friend who was part of the Chinese Students Club at Columbia. And each year they do an event called the Lunar Gala Fashion Show. And she was participating in it through her involvement in the club. But she said that they were looking for, any scene directors who could direct like part of the show. So I actually got to direct part of a fashion show on campus, which was really cool. So I remember also including that in my resume and talking about that in my phone interview for this Marie Claire internship, because I was talking about how we actually reached out to designers in the city. I'm pretty sure Daniel also lent clothes for that too, if I'm remembering correctly. And maybe Hunter did as well. Like I was able to use my relationships with designers, borrow clothing for the shows, and then we would like dry clean and return the clothing. I forget where that came from. It must have been budget that the club had, because I don't think I was paying for dry cleaning and stuff myself. But the concept of like borrowing clothing from designers, getting it back to them safely, keeping track of everything, dressing people, staying organized, that all is exactly what you need to do and what you need to know when you're working in the fashion closet at a magazine. Also, they really overhired that summer, and there must have been like 20 or 30 interns. It was crazy. There were so many of us. So what ended up happening on the first day was I had come in expecting to intern in the fashion closet, and I did in some ways, but they ended up assigning some of us out to specific fashion editors, which was honestly just kind of lucky that that ended up happening. So that summer, I interned for two fashion editors at the magazine. First, I interned for Ray Boxer, who I want to say at the time was just considered like a fashion market editor. And then Ray ended up, I'm pretty sure, moving to Spain with her boyfriend. I have absolutely no idea what she's up to these days, but I would love to reconnect with her if possible. Once Ray left, we ended up working under Jessica Minkoff, who at the time I think was the fashion features editor at Marie Claire. And like that, I was convinced was my dream job at the time. So I was really happy to meet and connect with both of them and really get to help manage first and foremost like their stories and what they were working on. And then if they didn't have much going on at the time, or if they were out at meetings and stuff, then we would kind of go back to the fashion closet and see if they needed any extra hands. Now, this was probably the closest internship to actual Devil Wears Prada, if I were to categorize it based on what you've seen and what you've heard about fashion magazines and the media. This probably came the closest to it. Also, for reference, Nina Garcia was the editor-in-chief of Marie Claire at the time, and I basically had zero interaction with her. Like, we were advised to basically just like leave her be and not approach her as interns, that she probably didn't have time to talk to us, which was totally valid. But to give you just even a little bit of context about this internship, the first day, the first night, I should say, I left at midnight. Like, I arrived at 9 a.m. and I left at midnight. That's just how it was. And for some reason, we didn't question it. We didn't say at like 8 p.m., like, look, I'm unpaid, I gotta leave now. Like, it felt like we were so important and that we were doing such critical work to like make sure that things got done. And again, I still like loved every second of it, even though it was crazy. That was the only time we ever stayed that late. At the time, Marie Claire was also trying to launch this mini magazine called Branche. I This lasted for like maybe less than a year, if I had to guess. But so they were publishing like a mini zine almost on top of publishing the regular issue. So that's why the workload was like totally skewed the first week that we just happened to start there. They actually had some cool concepts for Branche, but no one had attempted to like create another magazine while creating the original magazine before, so that definitely led to some of the chaos. But this was really my magazine crash course, honestly. We would get to walk in and see editors had these boards where they would pin like lists of things that they were thinking about for future spreads and future concepts. They would share image inspiration. They would take pictures of outfits for photo shoots. They would download them from like style.com back at the time. I think before it got absorbed by Vogue Runway or whatever, would have every single look from every single collection. They would have us like print them out. They would cut them out. They would pin the looks on the board that they wanted to call in to shoot for the magazine. And we helped with a lot of coordination. We helped reaching out to request items from PR agencies, getting them in, steaming them, putting them on racks so that the editors could come in and do like a look through of everything so that editors could pitch their ideas to Nina and she could approve them. And then we would be responsible for packing them in trunks, getting the trunks to the sets, scheduling all of the UPS pickups and everything, or the messenger pickups. Hearst actually had its own internal messaging team, or messenger team, I guess I should say. Those people, they kept that place running, let me tell you. Without them, there would be no magazines. We would make sure that all the trunks got to the shoot locations at the right time. Sometimes there would be interns on set to unpack trunks and get things steamed and on racks there. Then you would have to pack them all back up, get them back to the office. We would unpack everything, steam it again, dry clean it if needed, and send it back to the PR agencies. And we would do that basically anytime there was a photo shoot for the issue, which at the time, these were solid magazines, still golden years for the most part. These were chunky issues. And I think one of my top internship memories from that summer, though, was definitely assisting on the set of a cover photo shoot for the magazine. And it honestly didn't even occur to me that that was something interns could do. I just felt like covers were a whole different ballgame from the rest of the magazine. So for that September 2014 cover, I remember they had Blake Lively on the cover and they shot it out in the Hamptons. And one of the editors brought one of her interns with her to that shoot. And I remembered being like, oh my God, I have never been more jealous in my life. Like, I would have done anything to go to the Blake Lively cover shoot in the Hamptons. Like, oh my God. So I was like, whoever is on the October cover, and, we used to shoot, like, this was July and August that we were interning, but we were shooting a couple of months in advance. So I was like, okay, whoever's on the October cover, like, I don't care who it is. I don't care where it is. Like, I want to be on that set because that was my chance, like, before the internship ended. So I remembered going to Ray, who was my boss at the time that I was reporting to, and asking her if I could assist on set for the October cover shoot. And she was like, oh, you want to do that? And I was like, yeah, I really do. Like, wherever it is, just let me know. I'll get myself there. What do I need to do? And she was like, oh, okay. So it ended up, well, first of all, thank God it ended up being in New York City because I wouldn't have actually wanted to like get myself to the Hamptons without the assistance of the magazine. And I don't know what they would or wouldn't have paid for at the time. So I was able to take the subway and I was living at Barnard that summer. So I was living on campus, which was great. I was able to take the subway. It took place in Brooklyn, guys. And actually, the fact that I'm able to say this today, like given who this person has become in pop culture, is so crazy. But I got to assist on set of Ariana Grande's October 2014 Marie Claire cover. Ariana Grande, you guys, actually, they posted a behind the scenes video. It's no longer on the official Marie Claire channel, but some Ariana Grande fan account has like taken the video and posted it on their channel. I'm going to link it in the show notes. And if you watch this video at around 20 seconds, you'll see me and Ariana Grande in this like behind the scenes video. It's actually crazy. So this was shot at the Green Building in Brooklyn, which I believe is no longer open, but it was like an event space. I actually remembered thinking like, oh, this would be such like a quirky, like random place to get married one day because I saw that they did weddings, but we did this photo shoot there. I was there at like 7 a.m. steaming all the clothes, setting up the vegan snacks and whatever, because Ariana Grande, doesn't eat meat and all that. I was there at like 7 a.m. steaming clothes. I think her call time might have been like 9 or 10, but I feel like she showed up several hours late. She claimed that she was sick that day. And I don't know, she wasn't rude on set, but she also wasn't like overly nice either. Her manager was actually great. I talked to her manager a bunch and I went out on a Starbucks run at one point and her manager told me to take one of the like big black Suburbans. He was like, "Oh, like Victor, whoever will drive you." And I was like, "Okay, that's kind of cool." So I went out and got like Starbucks for everyone. Oh, I'm sorry guys. I misspoke earlier. I'm just remembering now that I'm telling this story, but Anne Fuhlenweider was the editor in chief of Marie Claire at the time, and Nina must have been the style director or the creative director. But I just remember it was a whole thing about like, don't bother Nina. But Anne was really nice, and I spoke at this cover shoot, which was cool. And yeah, so that was like a big moment to be able to help out on set that day and basically just make sure like all the clothes were good, like if anyone needed anything. And again, that was a long day. I was there from like 7 a.m. to like, I don't know, 6 or 7 p.m., probably like a 12-hour day, plus an hour and a half commuting from the Upper West Side to the middle of Brooklyn. But it was still just so much fun. I think what I learned most from that internship was I thought fashion magazines were so cool and so exciting, but the entry level jobs in fashion required a lot of hard work, like a lot of thankless work, honestly, a lot of coordination. And I didn't think it was as fun as the fashion market editors and the fashion features editors who really got to create and conceptualize and come up with the ideas. Obviously, I understood you have to like work your way up the masthead, which is it's not the first page really, but one of the first pages of a magazine that lists everyone's job titles. It's very known in print magazines that like if you're lower down on the masthead, you are more of like an assistant or someone newer, and the highest people on the masthead, the top name is always the editor in chief, and then anyone else who's really up there is a more senior, more established person. But I always just thought the fashion market editors and the fashion features editors who got to write whatever they wanted about fashion and put together all these creative concepts and photo shoots had the best job in the entire world. My next internship was at Nylon magazine, where, spoiler alert, if you know this already, that's actually where I ended up working after graduation. So having this internship was major for me. Nylon was my first editorial internship. So Marie Claire was more of a fashion internship, and editorial internships more specifically refer to writing and storytelling. And actually, my friend Ava had interned at Nylon, I guess, in the fall of 2014 semester. So she referred me to the person who hired at Nylon when they were looking for interns for the spring 2015 semester. So thank you, Ava, again for the introduction. And what I ended up doing for that spring semester, this was my first real like in-person internship during the semester that I took on, was I ended up stacking my class schedule so that I could have 2 full days where I could be downtown at Nylon's office interning. I'm very lucky that I was even able to do that like the classes that I needed to take to graduate could be stacked all on like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that I could have Tuesday and Thursday or whatever I ended up doing to intern at Nylon. And I remember for that internship, since it was a writing internship, I did actually need to submit writing samples for it. So what I ended up submitting was a blog post that I had written for my blog, Keep Calm and Chiffon, and also a blog post that I had written for this Barnard website. It used to be called the 9 Ways of Knowing blog. And I had done like an album review of Ellie Goulding's album. It must have been, what album would that have been? Halcyon Days, maybe? I don't know. Also, Ellie Goulding has a new album out that I really need to listen to, but I want to like sit down and actually listen to it. So I haven't listened to it in passing yet, but I love Ellie Goulding. She's one of my all-time favorites. So anyway, I was able to submit those 2 writing samples. Again, not, any professional bylines or anything, something I wrote for a college publication and something that I self-published. Those were my writing samples. And during this internship, I got my first 2 digital bylines, and then I also got my first print byline. I got listed as a contributor in the May 2015 issue. If any of you have that one, Dakota Fanning is on the cover. And the 2 pieces that I got to write for the website were spring fashion for girls who love black and style inspiration from 90s TV show characters. Those were my 2 pitches that got approved as an intern. You have to imagine how great I felt when I actually got to write these. And this internship at Nylon was a lot more low key than my internship at Marie Claire. It was a lot more straightforward what my tasks were going to be every day. Mostly, I was just assisting the editorial team with whatever they needed. There were a lot fewer errands like running all around the city and more things within the office. Like, can you make copies of this? Can you fax this to this person? Can you bring this to the mailroom? Can you go grab me last year's October issue so that I can reference it for what we're going to pull for this year, like more so administrative-y stuff like that. I also transcribed a lot of interviews. This was my first time ever doing that. Can I just say, I know we have our concerns about AI somewhat, but thank God for AI transcription services now. The amount of time, the number of hours that I spent of my youth literally like transcribing things, like typing out what people were saying. Probably so much room for human error, just such a long and tedious process. I'm just so grateful now for like Otter AI, even Notion, like it pops up when I go to record the podcast. It sees that I'm hopping on Riverside and it's like meeting detected, need notes. And it's like, it'll transcribe whether I even want it to or not. Riverside transcribes everything. I even edit the podcast first through the transcription on here. It's just crazy to think that like back then I was just manually sitting there listening to people and typing every single word that they said, and you would have to listen to it on like 0.5 speed. Oh my god, it was, I have to say, I did not enjoy that part of being an editorial intern. And Michelle Lee was the editor-in-chief at the time, and then later when I ended up working at Nylon, deputy editor Melissa Giannini had been promoted to succeed Michelle Lee after she moved over to Allure. So that was kind of that era of Nylon when we still had print. We still had 10 issues a year combined, December, January, and June, July. Also worth mentioning, at this time, and what year was this, did I just say? 2015, the Nylon office was actually split. It was in this building in Soho called the Green Building, and it was split where half the office was Nylon. The other half was this kind of new up-and-coming company called Socialite. That's Socialite with a Y, where the second I would be. And that was a very early influencer and blogging talent agency that was somehow connected to Nylon. I didn't really understand the connection much other than the fact that we shared offices, and sometimes the Socialite team would invite bloggers mostly at that time, like to Nylon events and parties. But it was just really interesting that the two of them were so like next to each other and connected in that way when you think about what has changed and how the script has kind of flipped in a sense from traditional media and publishing to influencers and bloggers. So I always thought that was cool of Nylon that Socialite was connected to them in that way. So I just thought that was kind of worth noting because I feel like otherwise, for the most part, this internship was a lot more, like I said, straightforward, got to do a little bit of writing, especially for the website, and took on like one or two small news pieces for the print magazines, which was great. And otherwise really just helped the staff who were all like very laid back and lovely. Had basically like zero complaints leaving that internship, which I actually think is really rare and which made me even more excited to work there after graduation. I think my biggest takeaway from the Nylon internship was I loved the more laid back nature of an indie magazine. There were a lot fewer like people who needed to approve certain things or channels that you had to go through to do whatever it was that was on your task list for that day. Also, obviously, I loved like working in Soho and being downtown. That felt a lot cooler than like being in Midtown where I had interned at Marie Claire in the Hearst Tower, even though the Hearst Tower is iconic, obviously, and I was lucky to intern there as well. But Soho just felt like more my vibe at the time. I absolutely loved interning there and would literally like tell anyone who would listen that that's what I was spending my summer doing, or my spring semester, I should say. That brings us to summer 2015. So this is the summer between my junior and senior year of college. And during this summer, I got to intern at Cosmo on the digital side as a fashion and beauty intern. After doing two print internships, so like Marie Claire and Nylon, both of those internships that I did were technically for the print magazine. Even though I got digital bylines at Nylon, the time that I spent there every day was really helping out the print editors. But I was still blogging on the side and still really loved the idea of digital work and digital internships. And At the time, also, this is what like the bold type, the TV show would refer to as the .com. It was still that kind of point of contention of print has always been the more established thing, but then digital is starting to get like more clicks, more page views, maybe even start to overtake print in terms of how much money a publication was making. That summer, 2015, I interned 3 days a week at Cosmo and I lived on Barnard's campus again. This year, though, I applied for a grant that Barnard offered where I was able to get, I believe, a $2,000 stipend for the summer and super, super discounted housing, which meant that I lived in a dorm with no air conditioning. But those are the sacrifices that we make, even when it's summer in New York. But the stipend was really helpful because it helped me pay for lunches and Metro cards. Oh, RIP Metro cards. I tap to pay literally is way easier, but I am always going to treasure my Metro cards that I still have in my wallets. Now, Cosmo is technically another Hearst publication, but at the time, they really were differentiating the print publications and the digital publications. So my internship that summer was I would go to the Hearst Tower, but instead of going into the Hearst Tower, I would go like around the corner to what was called the Sheffield building, which was like right behind the Hearst Tower. But that's where they were putting some of the digital teams. So they actually didn't even share the same offices for a long time. We were almost in, it felt like the annex or something of the Hearst Tower. I'm pretty sure it was called the Sheffield building. I have that like burned into the back of my memory somehow. And Cosmo.com, like this internship, it really started to feel like everything was clicking for me. And we actually got to work in the beauty closet. I know that sounds bad, like, oh, you were working in a closet. The Cosmo beauty closet is no joke, okay? That is like a full-on room, maybe just half the size of the office that I'm in right now if you're watching on YouTube. But this internship really felt like the meshing and melding of all my different interests. So I actually ended up writing quite a lot for this internship. Unfortunately, though, again, similar to College Fashionista, I went to go look for some of my bylines to like include in the show notes or something for you guys, and actually basically all of them have been removed now. Like if you search my name in Cosmo, it looks like I've never written anything for them, which kind of sucks. But like, even to come back to the present moment for a second, the freelance writing that I'm doing right now, that I've been doing for Glamour and that I've also done for Birdie in the past, a lot of that has been going back in and completely like reworking and re-editing old articles to update them with fresh links and new copy and new product recommendations and all of that stuff. And I am never in control, by the way, of whether or not like the people who used to have that byline keep that byline and I just get added on. Sometimes they scrap those people entirely and it looks like it's just my story. I'm never in control of that though. I don't say like, make sure you get rid of that first person who wrote this story and give me all the credit. It really just depends on the publication and their own needs and what they are going to do when they update stories. So I suspect that a lot of what I wrote back then has either been like updated now and a new author has been given credit for that story, or they may have just scrapped it entirely if like the formatting doesn't match the way that the website looks now. I have to say, like my nylon stories, I will link some of them in the show notes because they are still there. But if you go all the way back to like the first two that I ever wrote, it's a very bad reader experience on the website. It's like green background, black text. Like, I don't know what's going on there. It looks like a mess to me. Cosmo was also just by far the most like fun and spontaneous place that I worked. I feel like they just always had like the funniest and quirkiest ideas for stories, but that always somehow still hit and always still resonated with their audience and always still worked. I got to sit in on pitch meetings. I got to help with digital photo shoots. I definitely was still running some errands, but it wasn't that crazy. And I felt a lot more involved with helping editors execute more long-term stories, like less trending news pieces. If anything, sometimes we were assigned the trending news pieces, which was really fun. But to actually like start a story and see them take 2 weeks or however long it was to actually like test a bunch of things or try it or do whatever. And one big takeaway I remember from this internship was one of the editors told me, like, if you're going to start a story with a problem, you always also need to provide the solution. So if it's like jeans are uncomfortable and you wanted to write a whole thing about like it's such a lie, like people say jeans are comfy, but I don't think they are. It's like the story would have to you would have to rephrase it and say like jeans are uncomfortable. Here are 7 presentable alternatives that you should wear this season or something like that. And I feel like coming from a service-based perspective of how can I serve my readers today? Like how can I help the people who came to this website looking for an answer to their question, a solution to their problem, inspiration for something that's coming up? That has really stuck with me and influenced my writing, I would say, for the rest of the years. Interning at Cosmo.com definitely felt to me like the closest to what I really, really wanted to do, which was write thoughtful but also trending stories about fashion and beauty for a digital publication. And that brings us to the last internship I did in college. So, spring 2016, my last semester as a college student. 2 days a week, I interned at New York Magazine. My friend Devin helped me get this internship. Shout out, Devin. Thank you so much. And Devin actually still works at New York Magazine today. She's an incredible staff writer for Vulture. I will link her author page in the show notes. If you guys have a New York Magazine subscription, go read all of her stuff. She is so talented. And at New York Magazine, I was an editorial intern. I interned there 2 days a week. And guys, this internship number 6 was my first paid internship in college. Kind of brutal, right? And I also want to add that the whole time that I have been in New York, starting from, I want to say like November 2013 up until this January 2016, I was working at Free People part-time to help basically be able to afford to do all of these unpaid internships. So during the summer months, on the days that I was interning 3 days a week, the reason I wasn't interning 5 days a week and going in every single day was because I needed to work some of the other days to, again, help support myself and make sure that I was earning some money at least to like live and bop around the city. My parents very kindly helped me out with college and with summer housing for these internships and stuff. But as far as like food and entertainment and spending money and all of those things, like I really wanted to still be earning my own money too. And I'm grateful I was getting help, but I was also just being realistic that living in New York is expensive and it's not a bad idea to also be, at a job that pays you real money. But because New York Magazine was finally a paid internship, that was the justification that I had been looking for to be able to like leave my retail job. And I actually really loved working at Free People. I have a whole episode where I went through what I learned about fashion from working in retail. If you guys want to go back and listen to that one, I can link it in the show notes. And I really enjoyed working at Free People, but it was also like my senior year spring. I wanted to like enjoy myself somewhat. And I thought if I'm getting paid at least for one of these things and it basically pays the same, if not a little more than what my retail job paid, then I can afford to quit in a sense. So I was able to do that. I believe at the time, I want to say they paid me like $8 an hour, and then they doubled that if I was transcribing interviews, which I have to say I did a lot. And while it was good to make money, it was also so much transcribing, like really, really a lot of transcribing. I mean, New York Magazine is definitely one of the top in terms of their reporting, their stories, their exclusives, their coverage of just everything. I feel like they have the best writers for every single category, whether it's fashion, politics, food, anything you can think of. Truly, I feel like they have a very top tier staff. I'm really happy that I also got to intern for a really prestigious magazine like New York Magazine and experience those types of stories, see what went into reporting for those features and profiles and things like that. I did also get a couple of bylines through this internship. I also got sent out occasionally to some events or like running certain errands, dropping things off, maybe doing a little bit of coverage for red carpet interviews and things like that. And this was definitely the most kind of traditional journalistic experience that I got to have as an intern. I will say that when it came to the work itself, even though I was actually in the office, it was a lot of solo work. I feel like I really didn't get to know my fellow interns that much compared to like by the end of the summer at, Cosmo or Marie Claire, I actually felt like I left with industry friends. Shout out Kelsey, who I interned with at Cosmo, Aisha, who I interned with at Marie Claire. Like, those are people who I'm still in touch with today. So yeah, it was definitely a lot more like solo work and serious, which like I also like, and there's a time and place for that. But in terms of when I look back on fit and alignment from all of the internships that I was able to do, I definitely felt like the Cosmo.com one, where I was able to write, but also have the fashion and beauty focus for a digital brand, felt the most in tune with what I really wanted to do in the future, which works out well because if you've made it to the end of this episode, you know already that I am a fashion and beauty content creator and that is my job, which is crazy to say. Before I went full time with content creation, though, I did go on to work at Nylon and Interview. And I did do a whole episode about my career journey, like how I got from print magazine editor to digital content creator. But I could probably do a more in depth episode too about what it was like to be an editor at Nylon and Interview. So if that is of interest, let me know. Maybe I could do that for a future episode. And I really hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. It's crazy to think back on all of those experiences and just being so like young and excited to work and running around New York and getting to do so many things that my childhood self would have not believed that I even got to do. I mean, she probably would have wished that they were paid, but one thing at a time. And I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you again next week.